First, fasten your seatbelts and let's talk about flying. Air traffic controllers are warning that UK skies are running out of room. Friday was billed as the busiest day of the year with an estimated 8,800 flights, a record number. There have been calls for a drastic modernisation in the way aircraft are guided across UK airspace. Environmentalists, too, are concerned about the impact of the soaring numbers of planes. So should we fly less? We'll discuss that in a moment after Samantha Flanagan samples some views from passengers at Manchester Airport.
Holidays, weekends, business. More and more of us are taking to the air. During peak times, the skies above the UK are a beehive of activity.
I'm at Manchester Airport, where a staggering 27 million passengers pass through every year. Today alone, 100,000 people will take off and land on one of these. Colette, this is a really busy day for you at Manchester Airport, and this is the busiest summer ever for UK air travel.
We've had 718 flights depart from the airport. It's going to get even busier over the summer period. As it stands, this weekend alone we'll have over 400,000 passengers.
Do you enjoy being on the plane? Is that part of the holiday?
Yeah, it's quicker, so it's more convenient.
What's the best thing about being on a plane?
Take off.
What's the appeal of the destinations that you can only get to by plane?
Guaranteed warm weather.
Choice in the holidays.
Different experiences, tasting different foods, meeting different people.
Huge numbers of people passing through the airport then. How do you cope with that kind of capacity?
We've just launched our £1 billion transformation programme, which is going to see the whole of Terminal 2 be redeveloped over the next 10 years. And that means that we'll be able to accommodate not only the 27 million passengers we've got today, but we can actually have up to 50 million passengers coming through our door.
So do any passengers here feel guilty about flying so much?
When you're flying, do you ever think about the impact that that has on the environment?
We think about it, but we don't do it often enough to feel that we're having such an impact.
No, I don't even give it a second thought.
I must say, I have looked at the sky and, seen the big line of smoke, thinking, wow.
Obviously, the environmental tax includes in the price of the tickets, so I don't think about it because that's what the airports are paying for.
I think we say this every year, that this is not environmentally friendly and we must look at something else. And we've had some great staycations, but I can count on one hand how many days we've been able to go to a beach in the UK.
Sooner or later, the sky's going to get a little bit full if everybody keeps doing this every year. But while there's still a bit of space in the sky, we'll probably keep on booking.
There are people who think we should fly less because of the impact that flying has on the environment. What do you think about that?
We are still okay to be flying, but we need to do so responsibly. And the new aviation strategy, which the government are now consulting on, will make sure that we not only grow from an aviation perspective, but that we do so in a way that would be environmentally friendly. So it's not about not doing it, it's just about doing it in the right way.
In the meantime, people will just keep on flying.
How many times would you say you fly each year?
If we're lucky, twice. Just one this year, and it's one look forward to.
First flight of the year, but hopefully there'll be one towards the end of the year without the kids. They don't know about this.
Oh,
they do now. They do now.
Samantha Flanagan at Manchester Airport. Let's see what our panel thinks. Should we fly less? Well, joining us now are Angie Greaves, a radio broadcaster, Graham Hughes, an adventurer and author, Luke Gettos, a lawyer and writer, Sally Pavey, a campaigner. Welcome to you all. Graham, I'll start with you. You've got a world record. Tell us what it is.
I'm the fastest and first person to go to every country in the world without flying.
Why on earth would you do that?
Well, I thought it'd be fun. I also raised money for charity and to prove that it could be done and to sort of knock down these boundaries and borders and show that we can travel the world without flying. It is possible.
But why is it important not to fly? What for you?
Because the environmental impact, first and foremost. I mean, what we're doing to the skies at the moment is massive and it's having devastating effects already on some of the smaller countries in the world, like Tuvalu, which is suffering from these floods that they're having every year, and it's salt water. So it's not like a flood that we have here where it just goes away and it doesn't bother anyone afterwards. This is in the soil, salt, and things aren't growing.
Just briefly explain how you can get to every country without flying, because most people don't have the time and the money to do that.
That's fair enough.
Privileged.
Very difficult. At the moment, getting around Europe's pretty easy because you've got trains and buses, but getting around Africa, just getting from islands to islands in the Caribbean or the Pacific presents a lot of difficulties. And obviously, flying is cheaper, it's more convenient, and it's quicker.
Luke, just as a broad aim, it is noble to not fly and for all of us to fly less, isn't it?
Well, no, flying is an absolute modern miracle. You know, not all of us have the time to take trains and buses all over the world. One really interesting fact is that the average house income of people using Heathrow Airport has been coming down and down. That's a really good thing. More poor people are able to take flights, and I think that's a really good thing. What's also important about this is saving time. Time is very precious. And flying allows us to spend more time doing productive, creative things when we get to our destination. Not all of us want to be spending our time getting somewhere. We want to be doing things once we are there, and I think that's really important. Just a couple of facts. Aviation contributes less than 6% of UK emissions, so the impact is pretty negligible. And also, our carbon emissions are capped at the moment, because we're a member of the EU ETS. So actually, individual choice in flying makes very little difference at all.
So directly behind you in my eye line, Sally, she's shaking her head, she was raising her eyebrows. Tell us, you don't agree with that?
No, I'm afraid I don't agree with that, because you're talking about carbon trading, and it's not just the UK carbon. You're talking about trading. These planes are going to and from destinations, and so it is a much, much bigger thing of UK trading. And if we continue to fly as we are...
So what do you mean by that? As in they're doing the return journey?
Yeah, exactly. So you're flying to Europe, say, so there's a carbon trading going on in Europe, and then you're flying back to us and there's carbon trading. If we carry on the way we're going to breach climate change. The carbon trading does not work. If you added on the cost of carbon flying onto each ticket, less people would fly. And what you're talking about is less than half of the UK population actually fly. And so we're heavily subsidising an aviation industry. It's not a level playing field like car manufacturing. So aviation is heavily subsidised.
And the prices should go up.
Yeah, but no. But whilst I'm hearing what you're saying, and whilst I'm in total agreement, the average family who saves their money and decides to go on holiday isn't thinking along your lines. Now, if I want to go and see family in the States or Barbados or wherever, where can I get my family together and leave the UK and be there within 7-8 hours' time? Where can you have a huge amount of people in one go, going to another destination? And I will just say, whilst I really love, your stories, I've also been a big believer that travelling is actually the best education of life. You've probably got stories galore.
Absolutely. I don't want to see prices go up for flights. I think that if you take a few flights a year, go on holiday with the kids, that's great, fine. It's the people taking a flight every other day when they don't need to, because we have Skype, we have internet, we have ways of having a conference call without actually having to go to New York.
But Angie, shouldn't we be changing our way of thinking? Isn't that what it is? I mean, we used to all drive around without seatbelts.
Okay,
nobody would dream of doing that.
And we used to drive cars with exhaust. We can now drive electrically, can't we?
But we can't fly electrically.
No, at the moment, and I know it's going to take a huge amount of batteries to, but I do believe that in the future there will be an environmentally free way to fly, especially internally.
There already is a more environmentally friendly way to get to Europe, which is by the trains, but we don't utilise them. We don't have any trains that run at night, pretty much, or anywhere in Europe. The idea of just getting on a train somewhere in the UK and then waking up in your destination would be brilliant if the trains were nice and cheap.
Just one quick from Sally.
Can I just add in here that it actually costs me more to travel by train from Gatwick to London than it would cost for me to fly to Europe at the moment. That's not sustainable.
OK, someone who flies an awful lot, I think she even flew into the studio today, it's Emma Barnett.
That's a bit harsh, but yes, I did fly in for this discussion from my holiday. Well, it's not all about leisure that flights are obviously just used for. People use them for business a lot of the time. I'm joined now by businessman Bal Banson in our Nottingham studio. Good morning to you. How often do you fly for work?
I'll probably say fly once a month at least, if not twice.
OK, but people could argue in this day and age, you could do those sorts of meetings. I'm not quite sure how far you're flying, maybe it differs each time, but you could do them over Skype or FaceTime or over your computer. Why do you bother getting in a flight for a meeting?
You get so much from talking to someone around the table. I totally understand, we've got new technologies like Skype, etc. We can talk, you can see people, but you can easily get distracted. I've been on Skype calls where, somebody gets distracted or something else is going on. If you're sat around a table with someone, you're talking to them, there's so much more value you can get out of that.
OK, so that's your argument for it, but do you ever feel guilty? I mean, you're taking many more flights than the average Brit. What do you feel about that?
Don't feel guilty at all. At the end of the day, time is money. We need to get to places quickly. We need to talk to people. There's conversations to be had, decisions to be made, and the quicker we can do that, the better.
But the amount of time you spend checking in, flying, doing all of that, you could have been using that time to do other deals.
True, I could be doing emails, which I do sometimes, but then also the whole process is getting a little bit quicker. So, you know, there's apps now that have your boarding pass, so I don't need to queue up to get my ticket anymore. Go straight through, obviously security essential, onto the plane. You have your seat, you sit down, you fly, you're there. It's a lot easier and a lot quicker now, and I feel it's only going to get
so do you actually want to see, would you like to do more flights? I mean, would you like to have more options to fly at different times and make it even more flexible? Perhaps like some people would argue they take trains.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, there's a lot of low-cost airlines now as well. You know, I could get to Paris for like £40. You know, trying to get a train ticket in England, you know, let's say from Leeds or Nottingham down to London, is costing you £60, £80. So straight away I can fly, and it's a lot more cost-effective.
Well, maybe the train companies are listening. Bow Bouncel, thank you for talking to me. Well, let me talk now to, we were talking earlier in the discussion about environmental concerns over flying, and I can talk now in our Oxford studio to Ian Jobson, the Chair of Sustainable Aviation. Good morning to you, Ian.
Good morning.
Do you think enough is being done then to make flying more environmentally friendly?
Well, I do. I suppose you'd expect me to say that as Chair of Sustainable Aviation.
But like what? Because you can't fly lots of people, millions of people every single day in a way that is eco or green at the moment. You have to burn millions of litres of oil.
So I think it's true. We need to accept that we have environmental impacts as an industry, but it's also important to note that as an industry with the third biggest aerospace sector in the world, we directly add £22 billion every year to UK GDP. But of course we have environmental impacts. You know, aeroplanes make noise, they burn fuel, they emit CO2, and they cause local air quality.
But you say we're doing enough to address that. So what are we specifically doing to address that, or what are you doing, I should say, in the aviation industry?
As a coalition of around 40 of the biggest aviation companies in the UK, we've set out a roadmap to 2050 where we see that through various measures that I'll come on to in a moment, we can actually double the amount of traffic in the UK airspace by 2050, whilst not actually increasing CO2 emissions. Now, how will we do that? Well, firstly, we'll invest in new fuel-efficient aircraft. In fact, since 2005, the UK airlines have invested some £37 billion in around 470 new aircraft, and these aircraft are between 15 and 25% more fuel efficient than the ones they replace. And there's another 400 of those on order. So we fly more fuel efficient and quieter aeroplanes. We also changed the airspace to make it more efficient. Since 2008, we've made around 300 changes to UK airspace, saving around 5% of CO2 emissions. And we have more to do. And you mentioned earlier that the airspace above the UK is increasingly congested. We're driving towards airspace modernisation that will make the routes that the aircraft fly more efficient, so flying more close to their optimum levels, climbing smoothly to reduce fuel and noise, and descending more efficiently to, again, reduce fuel and noise. And then we're also investing a huge amount in developing alternative fuels, so sustainable alternative fuels for aviation. And then on the international stage, the industry is committed to, by 2020, developing a global, what's called a market-based measures scheme, so in effect an emissions trading scheme that will further reduce our emissions between now and 2050.
So you've got some targets there, 2020 and 2050. Ian Jobson, Chair of Sustainable Aviation. That's what the aviation industry has to say. Back to our panel, Sean.
Yeah, and the businessmen as well, Luke. I want to put those points to you from Bal. It's great for business. Face-to-face meetings are really important. Should we be flying more?
Absolutely. And I think the real danger is that we start saying things like, oh, you can just do it over Skype, oh, you can just use a phone call, because this is human interaction we're talking about. That's what travel enables, and mass travel, it enables the world to be a smaller place. What's not to like? I mean, it's not very long ago that if you lived in one country and someone else lived in a different one, it would be really difficult to see them and interact with them face to face. I think it would be awful if we just said, well, you know, people can do this thing over Skype, it would mean the end of face-to-face interaction, and that's what aviation can do. It's a very powerful tool for enabling human relationships. I think it should be celebrated.
Sally's shaking her head again. No, because many people I talk to about this, they have different views depending on where they live, and so I've spoken to a lot of people who don't want the third runway at Heathrow, but that's because they live on the flight path. There's a lot of NIMBY, not in my backyard, going on here, isn't there?
I mean, you can accuse people of being NIMBYs, but I think the problem is that if you actually read like government figures that came out on Friday, show that there's a huge drop in business travel. It's only actually contributing 20% now. So this growth is low-cost airlines.
A huge drop because of online.
Lack of people aren't travelling for business as much. And so across the country, that's not just one airport, that's across the country. And new I mean, I love Ian to bits at NAS, but new aircraft, well, yes, but not the low-cost aircraft. There's something like 25-year-old aircraft.
Well,
that are in the
EasyJet
skies.
are investing, aren't they?
Yes, EasyJet are investing, but they don't do long haul. You have to look to the long haul as well. And just, if I may, just touch on the noise factor, because Ian touches on these streamlined. This is where they are concentrating, putting motorways above people's homes, so they're getting every single arrival and departure. That is how they can cram in more aircraft and save the CO2. There's no consideration about the noise it's having on the ground at all.
Yeah, OK.
I'm particularly concerned at the fact that everyone here, that, you know, you, seems to want to put profit above morality here.
Absolutely.
And if we continue to do that, I don't think, you know, we'll still be the world leader in slavery, which we used to be. We've got to stop at some point and go, what's going to happen in the future here? If the polar ice caps melt, we're going to lose every beach in the world. So it's all well and good going, well, we go on a beach holiday now, but when there's no beach there in 20 years' time, how do you explain that to the grandkids?
Let's just hear from Emma now.
OK. Well, let's hear from you. You've been getting in touch. Bill just says on text, I don't care about the environment, being frank. I've got no children or grandchildren. I want to make my travels as convenient and as fast as possible. And Stuart, speaking to the economics, who's got in touch, good morning. I can fly from Edinburgh to Cardiff in an hour for £80 return. Compare that to an 8-hour journey and £230 train bill. But Nadia says, I refuse to fly anywhere in Europe that we can travel to using public transport. Planes are causing untold damage to our skies. And Ian, talking again to the economics on Twitter, says, maybe economics can save the world. Budget airlines are cheaper than trains. Increased costs would make us think twice. And Jill, a really interesting point to end on here on email. Thank you for this. Most families have one holiday a year where they fly with a full plane full of people. What about rich people who fly whole aeroplanes for just one person?
Yeah, I mean, there is this sort of concept that people who fly are a bit selfish. I mean, the first one there, he said he didn't care about the environment.
Well, look,
do you care about the environment?
Look, I care about the environment. You've heard
Do
a
you
number of measures.
if there was a priority list,
I think we need to
profit
talk
or environment.
Look, two things. One, climate change. We have to deal with the problem of climate change. The problem with places, hold on a second.
Let him speak.
The problem with places like that you mentioned is a lack of infrastructure. Floods are a problem in poor countries that need to be developed in order to cope with climate change. That's a different issue. There's nothing.
It's their problem.
Well, it's a problem with infrastructure and economic development.
Well, we have floods in the UK.
Now, hold on a second. It's not a problem. It's not a moral issue about taking a holiday. Taking a holiday is not akin to slavery, OK? There is nothing morally wrong with taking a cheap flight.
But the concept is that if it makes profit, we continue.
Can I just
saying it was?
Yeah, I wasn't.
But this isn't about that. This is about people's leisure time. This is about people's leisure time. We know that more and more poor people are being able to take holidays. That's the key dimension here. And I think there's a real snobbery around cheap flights, because the people taking cheap flights are the people who can only afford cheap flights. And they're the people that take one holiday a year at max in order to spend some time abroad. There's this real snobbery as if that is, like, not a worthwhile thing to do.
I completely agree. I completely agree about the cheap flights thing. I think they should stay. Yeah. I think that the train fares need to come down.
OK, guys.
So we've got an option.
Guys, Sally, this discussion has certainly taken off. We're going to have to land it. We're out of time. Thank you all very much indeed.